this special edition of i24 News. I'm Nicole Zedek coming to you from Nahal Oz as we mark 2 years since the October 7th Hamas massacre. This very kibbutz community was one of the hardest hit on that dark Saturday. And as we pre-record this 2-year special, the intense fighting is happening just a few kilometers behind us here in Gaza City. All as intense talks continue for a ceasefire in Gaza. Clearly, the October 7th attacks, they still define Israel's security, diplomacy, and daily life. All topics we're going to be discussing over the next hour. And to discuss it all with me, I'm joined by three familiar faces to our i24 News viewers. Danny Ayalon, the former Israeli ambassador to the United States, as well as the former Israeli deputy foreign minister. Lieutenant Colonel in Reserves Jonathan Conricus, the former international spokesman for the IDF, as well as a senior fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, as well as our i24 News senior Middle East correspondent Ariel Osirian. Gentlemen, thank you for being with us on this very important day as we discuss all of these very important topics. But Danny, I want to begin with you. A broad question as we begin this conversation, because 2 years later, when you look back at October 7th, what do you think has changed most for Israel? Is it security, diplomacy, or Israel's very sense of identity?
I would say, Nicole, all of the above. The 7th of October massacre was the darkest day for the Jewish people from the Holocaust, 85 years ago. It's certainly the darkest day for Israel since its reestablishment in 1948. We were caught unprepared, unawares, so in many ways it was a part of negligence, arrogance, and this was just a reminder of landing back in reality, the reality of the Middle East, where if you cannot defend yourself, you're done for, you're massacred. And since then, Israel has bounced back in a big way. So what happened as a local battle here, where we are in Nahal Oz and the near Gaza, has really changed the Middle East in many ways, and very fundamentally. One of the objectives of the Hamas, besides killing Jews, was to scuttle the Abraham Accords. They survived. And not only that, now the Iranian Shia axis is pretty much down. And so from a geopolitical point of view, Israel is much better now. But of course, we still grieve for all the losses.
Certainly, and you raise a very interesting question, Danny, that I would like you to answer, Jonathan, because 2 years later, Israelis are still asking, how did the country's most sophisticated intelligence system, most sophisticated defense system right here in these kibbutz communities, how did they miss something as major as October 7th? Is that a question we have an answer to 2 years later?
Yeah, I think Israelis are still waiting. Israelis and Jews around the world, parents of lone soldiers, etc., they're still waiting for that official inquiry into really bringing the high level as well as the tactical level of really how did it happen and how could we have failed so badly. And I think we failed, we, the IDF and the entire security establishment, failed in the most spectacular and horrible way. According to my understanding, based on what I've heard, read, interviewed, and the information that I have access to, I would put it at a mix of, first and foremost, convincing ourselves that we have a good understanding and hold of our enemy. I think we rationalized their behavior and we underestimated their capabilities. We completely misunderstood their strategic intentions, and we thought that if we could keep them on track of economic development and stabilizing the Gaza Strip, that would pacify them and that would cause them to relent on their jihadi creed. They didn't. And Hamas never relented on their jihadi creed, and they haven't changed their strategic objective, which is to annihilate the state of Israel. And I think we told ourselves stories that were simply untrue, but they fit a certain Western narrative, a two-state solution, peaceful coexistence, really a basic misunderstanding of the neighborhood we live in. And that led to us downplaying what the military saw, what the intelligence, the different red flags that were raised, and explaining away, wrongfully, that what we're seeing isn't really what's happening. And last thing, to put the stark contrast on that, I would say that if we would have addressed the threat emanating from Gaza with half the seriousness and vigilance that we addressed the threat coming from Hezbollah and the Iranians, I don't think that October 7 would have happened as severely as it did, or at all. I'm happy that today the biggest and most lethal enemy we had on our borders, Hezbollah, is downsized, still on its knees, and in strategic trouble. And that's a good thing. That's a good outcome of October 7. But I'm, of course, very sad to be in this place and to remember everything that happened here, just a few hundred yards away at Nahal Oz and all of the other communities.
It's very difficult to be back here and remember what happened 2 years ago. However, this year, unlike last, there is this sense of resilience, rebuilding. That's what's truly different 2 years versus 1 year later. As 2 years later, many of the residents have returned to these very kibbutz communities, as difficult as it may be. Let's take a look at some of those stories. 2 years after October 7th, Adele Raymer is back home at Kibbutz Nirim, one of the communities shattered during the Hamas massacre.
We used to call this place 95% heaven. For me, being back home, despite everything that's going on, I've got a little chunk of my 100% heaven back.
That heaven was nearly destroyed.
We got a message on our internal messaging system saying Israel has been invaded. Go outside your safe rooms, lock all your doors and windows, and then go back inside the safe room and lock yourselves in.
On October 7th, 2023, Adele and her son survived by locking themselves in their safe room.
The only way to keep that safe room door locked to any extent is by physically pulling on the handle and hoping and praying that whoever's on the other side of that door isn't stronger than you are.
Adele and her son spent hours of fear inside that safe room.
They're setting our houses on fire. Where's the army? Where are the police? Where are the people that are supposed to be coming to save us?
That was 2 years ago, and even though she's returned home, her sense of safety has changed.
I added new windows to my house, thicker windows with electric blinds so that I can close them to feel a little bit safer. I know that a machine gun or an RPG is going to cut through those like butter, but still it gives me more of a sense of security.
A sense of security from something as simple as a lock on the safe room door.
So there's this little metal latch that you put down and the door can't be opened.
Does this
How
make
effective?
you feel safer?
A little bit. They can break the handle, they can shoot through the door, they can, I don't know, but anything, every little layer of additional safety is good.
5 of her neighbors were murdered. 5 other community members kidnapped to Gaza, along with her close friends from Kibbutz Nir Oz, Judy Weinstein and Gadi Haggai.
So as soon as I got my dog tag to bring them home now, I had their names engraved on the back so that when they come home, I'd be able to give it to them. But in December, we were told that they'd been murdered on on October 7th, and their bodies had been taken as bargaining chips.
The IDF recovered their bodies in June of this year. Adele says the trauma is different for everyone, even within her own family.
It's respected that each person has been through their own traumas and has their own way of dealing with it. My way of dealing with trauma is talking about it and writing about it and giving interviews and blogging and vlogging. And my daughter's way of dealing with it was not talking about it. She almost lost her 3 children that day. The terrorists were she's separated from her husband. He's one of the first responders, so he had a gun with him. The 3 girls were with him that night. The terrorists entered, he killed the terrorists right in front of the safe room door. If he had not had a gun with him, they would have been killed or kidnapped.
2 years later, and her daughter still hasn't stepped foot on the kibbutz.
She's got trauma on trauma on trauma on trauma, and she's not capable, she hasn't even been here yet. And I don't ask her when she's coming, although I'd love nothing better to sit here on the porch with her and have her enjoy it. but it's going to have to be in her time.
Her grandchildren carry the memories from that day, too.
The middle one has a handheld fan that was heating up, and she smelled it, and she said to her father, she said, "This smells like the smell that happened after you shot the terrorist."
For months, Adele and her community lived displaced, first in hotels, then in apartments in Beersheba.
Living as a refugee in your own home, in your own country, it's very hard to plan things. You can't plan things. Nothing is in your hands.
That's why she decided to come back February 2025, with most of her community following suit by the summer.
Community builds resilience, and resilience is the name of the game.
Today, new homes are already rising from the ashes.
I did not believe it would happen this fast. I'm so proud of my community.
Adele says she still lives with the echoes of October 7th, but her determination and her community push her forward.
There are moments that I'm just wished back to then, and it's so alive and so real and so happening now. You can't just sink in the sorrow. Certainly the people that we lost wouldn't want us to be doing that.
For some, resilience means rebuilding, but for others, the pain is still too raw. 2 years on, the South is still divided, those who have returned home and those who still can't. I sat down with two residents from right here, Nahal Oz, who've been living in northern Israel's Mishmar HaEmek for the past 2 years, and they say they don't know when they're going to be able to physically or emotionally return home. We're sitting here in Mishmar HaEmek. It's beautiful, but it's not Nahal Oz. How has it been for you guys the past 2 years here?
We have felt safe every single day here. We've felt wanted. We've felt loved. But I'm a guest. This is not mine. I happened to be in Nahal Oz last week, and I happened to be sitting with people who are still living here in Mishmar HaEmek, and we kind of just all looked at each other like, so this is what it's like to feel like you belong.
Do you feel like you've been able to keep your sense of community of Nahal Oz here while still being so far away from Nahal Oz itself?
Nahal Oz being a place where we always had like those security challenges, and there was always like something to get over, to deal with. I think it brought us together it made us a very tight and close community. So it became a really strong part of our identity, and we carry it with us wherever we go.
With the Nahal Oz community then, now that 45% of the community has moved back and the other is still remaining here in Mishmar HaEmek or other places in the country, how do you maintain that sense of community while now 2 years later you are being more divided?
You know, I don't think 100% of people who are evacuated are going to come back. Hopefully 80 to 90%. But everyone misses it. Everyone wants it. Everyone misses the community, the people. So I hope that a lot of people will come just because they need it.
What's keeping you then from going back?
One is the fact that I still am not convinced that it's perfectly safe to bring my children to live there again. The war is still going on. It's very intense, and it's very close to Nahal Oz. It's 700 meters from our houses over there. And another thing is the healing, their psychological healing that they've been going through, and my own psychological healing that I've been going through ever since that day. It's a long and very hard process, and we've reached some very important achievement with that process, with my children and with myself and with my family. And I would not throw that away. To hear those bombs go off, those cannon shells whistling through the air, machine guns firing, you name it, it's like a battlefield.
PTSD is very complex. Triggers are from various different things, and I want us to get stronger before going back. And I think the first test will be that when we're there, the whole family, and the first siren comes, how's that going to be?
But what will it take for you to go back? What do you need from the state of Israel and from your own personal families as well?
Right now, it's basically for the war to end, and we really expect the release of the hostages. One of our friends is still there, Omri Miran, and I can't see how anyone can expect a community to rebuild itself with one of its members in this condition so close by, and it's actually impossible. So those two things are basically the baseline requirements for me to go back.
It's very hard, but it's very simple. End the war. Bring them home. Let us try and heal.
There was no investigation into the huge failures that caused this catastrophe. How do they expect me to bring my kids over where everything failed and no one asked those important questions?
Looking forward to the future then, can you see and envision you and your families in Nahal Oz, us sitting down and doing this interview in a safe area right next to the Gaza border?
As soon as you said safe area, I can envision us going there. I can envision us having this conversation. Nahal Oz is a saying, 95% heaven, 5% hell. We've been saying that for years, right? So we really hope to get to when it's really, really good. Not 95% of the time, but 100% of the time. Because we've been living in the 5% for the last 2 years. The 5% has become our 100%.
So many places around the world have seen the end to their wars.
Yes.
And we will.
And this will end too.
So clearly there are still a lot of looming questions at play, a big one being for these residents, when and how they're going to finally start to feel safe here in the south. Danny, beyond a ceasefire, as we still hear what's happening in Gaza behind us, what has to happen to the south for these residents to actually feel safe, those who have returned and those who haven't?
First of all, it's amazing that most of them have returned. By the way, there is a big line of volunteers who would like to come and resettle here and bring their, build their homes here and their family. It shows, I think, the Israeli resilience, or if I can quote what Golda Meir said, we are here and we're fighting as we are because there is no elsewhere for us to go. So this is really the epitome of the Israeli, I would say, spirit. And I would say for a good outcome out of this misery of the 7th of October, we should see a totally new and reformed Gaza, where Hamas is nowhere to be seen over there, never to come back. We should see the dismantlement of all the tunnels, the demilitarization with, the gathering of all the weapon, whatever is remain there, and to de-radicalize Gaza. And for that, I think we will need a real 5, 10, even 20-year plan, because it's not going to be overnight, and I'm afraid that what we have seen may impact in the wrong way generations of Palestinians to come. So we have to be vigilant, and we have to make sure that any political outcome will not give, not the Palestinians, certainly not to Hamas, any rewards.
This is what's so difficult for many of our viewers to understand, Jonathan, this ideology that is inside Gaza, this radical Islamist Hamas ideology 2 years later. Is it any less prevalent, or what does the future hold?
Yeah, I think when Mohammed bin Salman in Saudi Arabia started to try to reform his country, he assessed the situation and he started to reform two main systems because he understood that they were the fertile breeding ground for extremism, radical Islamist extremism. And if he doesn't do change there, then there won't be long-term sustainable change in his country. Those two systems were the education system and the mosques. The same applies in Gaza. Gaza has been a fertile breeding ground for jihadi Islamism for generations. The schools, or the places where children are indoctrinated in Gaza, run by UNRWA, are places that really are an assembly line for the next generation of terrorists. So when we speak about ideology and when we speak about the future, and I very much agree with Ambassador Ayalon, all of what he says is true, and I would add to that, to say it very clearly, UNRWA must be dissolved and must be forced out of Gaza, and not a day too soon. No meaningful long-term change will happen in Gaza without UNRWA being disbanded and Palestinians there being told that you are no longer refugees, you are people, you are not victims, you have the ability to shape your own future, and you are not to be waiting on the handout from other people. You own your destiny and you're responsible for it, and you will be held accountable for your actions.
Ariel, there's still no answer on the day after, and that's what's so difficult also when we talk about what needs to happen. If Hamas is destroyed, what replaces it? Can Israel afford another power vacuum in the Gaza Strip?
Right, Nicole. So, as you say, we're 2 years into this war, and there's still no answer. But this question was there since day one. And we've seen complete failure on the part of the Israeli government putting forth a coherent plan that outlines Israel's legitimate security strategic demands moving forward, with obviously consultations with its partners. What we are seeing right now, I think the most clear vision for the future is what U.S. President Trump has put forth on the table, what's dubbed the 21-point plan. But ultimately, the main question is there is no such thing as a political vacuum inside the Gaza Strip. If you want to get rid of the genocidal jihadist governance of Hamas, you have to put in some alternative. And Israel has not achieved at finding such alternative. But in the meantime, we have seen that on the global stage, led by regional powers such as Saudi Arabia, the UAE, they are priming the Palestinian Authority. And so whether Israel wants to or not, in this 21-point plan, in one way or another, under one name or another, the Palestinian Authority is being reintroduced to the Gaza Strip. There are currently 10,000 security officers who are being trained in Egypt to assume control on the ground as the policing force, where this 21-point plan stipulates that there will also be international Arab peacekeeping force that will be on the borders. That is according to what these Arab countries the leaders met with Trump on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly. This is what they want to see. So it kind of seems that whether Israel wants to or not, the entire global community that is pushing for this day after vision in Gaza is setting its sights and grooming the Palestinian Authority to assume its control. And now this is something that Prime Minister Netanyahu has said since day one. No Abbas, that's Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas, and no Hamas. But the reality on the ground has proven that there is no third element to that, no matter how hard Israel has tried, and it appears that it's the international community that is pushing forward the Palestinian Authority, and it's going to be up to Israel to decide whether it completely marks off this entire proposal, or if it swallows this frog.
Well, as we focus on Israel's south, we can't forget Israel's north either, because it was just one day after Hamas launched this unprecedented attack on Israel's south that Hezbollah joined the fight, launching tens of thousands of rockets from Lebanon. Tens of thousands of residents in northern Israel, they had to evacuate. And 2 years later, the security situation, it's an entirely different reality. But the residents, they're still learning how to return home. Our host and correspondent, Natasha Kirchuk, she went to northern Israel to speak to some of these residents and see how they're coping with daily life.
את מרגישה שזה כבר הבית שלך פה?
זה לא הבית, את יודעת, עד הסוף, אבל כן.
כמה פעמים עברתם דירה מאז שקניתם את מנרה?
5, 1, 2, 3, 4. 4? אוקיי, אז זה הדירה החמישית? דדה! יותר טוב ממני. דדה, והוא נולד פה.
אמרי, מאיפה אתה?
ממנרה. ממנרה?
כן, אתה עדיין מרגיש שמנרה זה בית שלך?
כמה זמן אתה לא גר שם?
שנה וחצי.
אתה רוצה לחזור לגור שם?
אתה רוצה?
The Al-Colombres are one of hundreds of families who are still displaced. 2 years after Hezbollah opened a second front on Israel's northern border on October 8th of 2023, just a day after Hamas attacked southern Israel. They're originally from Kibbutz Managa, a small Israeli community on the border with Lebanon that was evacuated almost immediately. Today, Shelly, her husband Tom, and their 3 kids live in Kibbutz Ayelet HaShachar, about 20 minutes south of Manara. And like many young families, they still haven't decided if they're ready to move back.
תום שלי מאוד 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 רוצה לחזור בין הקיבוץ, ואני גם מאוד אוהבת את המקום, ואני חוששת.
למה את חוששת?
7 לאוקטובר. שלא יהיה שוב. ואני עם 3 ילדים קטנים. לחיות על הגבול זה מאוד מפחיד עכשיו.
It's very faint, but you can actually hear the Muslim muezzin call to prayer just across the border in Lebanon right here, because we are in Manara, which is perched on Israel's border with Lebanon. And many of the homes that you're seeing right here can actually see directly into Lebanese villages. Some are as close as 70 meters away from where we are right now. And that is why this kibbutz has become one of the main targets throughout the last 2 years of conflict with Hezbollah. In fact, over 80% of the homes on this kibbutz have been damaged by either rockets or explosive drones launched by terrorists in Lebanon.
איזה מנהרה?
ראית? את רק בחלק העליון עוד.
קצת שונה ממה שהיה.
Today, I'm meeting Shelly's husband Tom in Kibbutz Manara. It's the first time I've been here since the war began.
זה הכפר הלבנוני, זה מיסל ג'בל. משם בעיקר ירו על הקיבוץ את הנונטטים.
Tom was living on Manara throughout the war as part of the local security team, while Shelly and the kids moved around the country.
זה הבית של ההורים. לא היה פגיעה ישירה בתוך הבית, היה בבניין 2. יכולה לראות איך נראה החצר שעף פה, הכל. בריחת דגים, מרפסת, הכל היה פה.
איפה היית כשזה קרה?
באחת מהפעמים אנחנו קיבינו פה שריפה, וירו על זה. התחיל פה שריפה ענקית ויש פה צובר גז. פחדנו שהוא יתפוצץ ובאנו לחבות. אני שכבתי פה, קיביתי את האוטו של אבא, ועמדו פה חיילים למעלה, ואז ירו עלינו עוד נונטט שפגע פה. החבר'ה שעמדו פה למעלה, הם בעיקר נפגעו מהרסיסים. מאתגר, ומעביר הרבה אתגרים עומדים תוך כדי. עם המשפחה, עם עצמך, עם הכל.
ואתה עדיין מוכן לחזור לגור פה?
כן, אני עדיין מוכן לחזור לגור פה. עוד פעם, לא בלי סימני שאלה, אבל אני עדיין מוכן לחזור לגור פה, בהחלט.
For many, the concept of coming back to live right on the border with Lebanon is a frightening one, whether or not the ceasefire with the Hezbollah terror group holds. But the kibbutz is already beginning to reconstruct the hundreds of homes damaged and destroyed here.
היינו יושבים כאן כל שישי בצהריים. היה שם פה בריכה קטנה לילדים, כל שישי צהריים. שישי צהריים לפני המלחמה כאילו היינו פה.
כן.
כולנו. פה זה היה שרפה וקיבינו אותה והיה לנו התראות נונטט. למזלנו, יצאנו מזה.
איבדנו ספירה.
מעל 100 בוודאות.
מעל 100.
106 כטב"מים ראינו מעל הראש.
פה גן ילדים הזה חטף פגיעה ישירה. גם פה, לא יודע, בתים פה, חטפו פגיעות. אלה הגני ילדים.
קינדרגרדן.
עכשיו עושים שיקום. אני בטיולים עם נטשה.
This new kindergarten marks a new beginning for Manara, but it's only open for a mere 7 children between the ages of 3 to 6. The community was once home to about 280 people. Today, around 90 have returned, but that number is expected to grow. Lior's family is one of the first to come back to live here.
This is the reason why I cannot leave this place. Look what I have. Look at the view.
A lot of people would say that you're crazy for being willing to come back and live here with your children.
They are right. We are crazy for living here. I don't feel like it's safe around here, but this is our place. Like, this is our home. We have no other place to be.
For many members of the older generation from Manara, like Tom's parents, coming back to Manara was never a question, even though their house was destroyed. They've lived here for more than 50 years.
לא הייתי ממשיך לגור במקום אחר. אנחנו אוהבים את מנרה, למרות הקשיים.
תמיד היו. כשהייתי אימא לילדים קטנים, אז הייתה חדירה של מחבלים למסגבם, והיה שם סיפור שלהם. אני זוכרת כל לילה לפני שאני הולך לישון, אני חושבת איפה אני מחביאה את הילדים אם קורה משהו. אבל בסוף זה לא מנהל לך את החיים, הפחד הזה.
למדתי ששום דבר כבר לא קבוע בחיים, והכל בר שינוי. גור על הגבול זה קצת ריזיקה. לקחת את הריזיקה הזאת, הסיכון, מצד אחד. מצד שני, זה יכול להיות בכל מקום, זה מה שאני אומרת. זו שאלה מהותית קצת. כן. איפה נהיה, מה נעשה. אבל מנרה תמיד תהיה חלום.
We've spoken about many of the strategies and policies, but for the men and women serving, especially those who were called up from civilian life on October 7th, it's not just about history. This is their reality. Reserve soldiers, they have carried much of the burden of this war over the past 2 years, balancing service, family, and even their careers. Well, I'm joined now by Sergeant Max Kresh, leader of Soldiers for the Hostages, which is one of the growing movements of war veterans who are openly refusing to continue their service in protest of the handling of this war. And Max, thank you for being with us. I want to first talk about your experience when you were called up as a civilian to reserve duty, and then you stopped answering that call. What was that decision?
Right, so I enlisted on October 7th without any doubt in my mind that I was going to go where I needed to go. I was sent to the northern border of Lebanon, and that same evening of October 7th, we were waiting in an ambush for Hezbollah terrorists to come through, and based on the intelligence that we had at the time, we expected to hopefully be able to slow them down so that the people behind us could stop them. I was ready, just like everybody else, to put our lives on the line and to die protecting this country, and that's the call. That's the call that we answered. Today, I think that call is it's still the same call that we're answering, and we see that we have a leadership of this country, of this war, that is leading us towards disaster. Like me, and like all of the soldiers in our movement who are openly refusing, there are thousands, possibly tens of thousands, of soldiers who are quietly refusing. And when we speak out openly, we're also giving voice to those soldiers who, until now, are not able to speak out. They're not able to muster up the ability to speak out.
Are you worried that by, yes, giving a voice to those who don't want to continue to serve, but those that do want to continue, and they're putting their lives and risking their lives in Gaza right now, are you worried that by you not showing up, their lives are in more danger?
First of all, I'll say that we're also doing this for them. I see this as my duty towards my friends who are going actively back into Gaza, and for them it's too much of a step. It's too difficult for them to say, I'm not doing this, even though they don't trust the mission, but they need to be there for their friends. And it's something that's very important for all of us to recognize that we're all in this together, and we're being manipulated, we're being abused, and it takes people to be able to speak out and to stand up against this abuse.
How do you see this war ending? You've been on the front lines, you've seen it yourself. Is there a clear vision for a victory in this war?
I think the word victory is thrown around way too loosely. After something like October 7th, there's no such thing as victory. We can have rehabilitation, we can build But there's no victory after October 7th. There's no victory after hundreds of soldiers have been killed and civilians have been harmed and families have been torn apart and people's lives have been uprooted for so long. And we as a society have to live with everything that our country has done throughout this war, unfortunately, including to very many civilians in Gaza, which is something that we don't talk about enough, but it's a very real reality.
I want to open this conversation with Jonathan Conricus as well, because this fatigue that we're seeing from many of these soldiers not wanting to come and continue to fight. 2 years is a long war for Israel. These soldiers are not used to fighting this. How can the army continue to fight this war if we're going to see more and more of this fatigue?
Yeah, I think that obviously war is a horrible thing. When you fight, when you're forced to fight, you find yourself in a very difficult situation, and usually it's the weaker links that break first. And I don't agree with much of what you said. I think that you're totally wrong in claiming or stating that there cannot be a victory. By the same logic, no free country should ever fight to defend itself just because it had a bad start. The Nazis wouldn't have been defeated, neither would the imperialists of Japan or ISIS, for that matter. So, of course, victory is not only possible, it is really mandatory. For us to be able to live here, for this community to be able to bounce back, and for there to be a long waiting list for the kids' kindergarten, the first necessary thing to do is to achieve victory. And victory is what will enable all that. Now, I cannot condone and I cannot agree with people who refuse to serve for whatever political reason. Not those who are legally or illegally exempt from service to begin with, from one side of the political establishment in Israel, or people who claim other reasons too. I think that the very core here is that we are a country and a society at war. We are being attacked from several fronts simultaneously. And I regret very much that there are parts of Israeli society who believe international propaganda and politically motivated propaganda in Israel and undermine the very strength and fabric of society. Of course, I have my complaints and criticism about how the government is running or not running this war. I have my criticisms of how the cabinet is prioritizing wrong things over the right things. I feel very deeply about how long it has taken Israel to get our hostages back. I think that is a tremendous strategic blunder on behalf of the State of Israel and the Prime Minister, who is ultimately responsible. Having said that, at the end of the day, we're a country, we're at war, and now is not the time to be refusing. It's the only party that enjoys this is our enemies, which I'm sure seek great strength from seeing the fringes of Israeli society start to falter.
Well, this is just part of the internal debate that we are seeing here 2 years later from many of the Israelis themselves. We see it, this international debate, but it is felt right here at home. And you both raise interesting questions of 2 years later, what has actually changed as far as the security on the ground? Our correspondent Robert Swift takes a look at the actual security implications of what's happened over the past 2 years.
The first anniversary of October 7th was marked as Israel's many-fronted war ground onwards. On October 16th, Yahya Sinwar, architect of the massacre a year earlier, died, killed in a chance encounter on the battlefield of Rafah. While Israelis celebrated, Palestinians eulogized Sinwar's defiance. Late November saw a key turning point as Israel and Lebanon agreed a ceasefire. The culmination of 2 months of Israel breaking Hezbollah down through pager attacks, an invasion of southern Lebanon, and a campaign of airstrike assassinations. By early December, unintended consequences emerged as the regime of Bashar al-Assad in neighboring Syria collapsed, shorn of external support. Israel responded to the ascension of a former jihadist to power by seizing Syrian land and striking military hardware.
Congratulations.
But by January 20th, a different leader's arrival altered the war's course. Under Trumpian pressure, Hamas and Israel agreed a ceasefire, an arrangement that lasted 2 months and saw 25 Israelis freed. Weeks of emotional reunions and tense handovers followed, with Israel resuming attacks in mid-March, focused on southern Gaza. On 23rd March, IDF troops killed 15 unarmed paramedics, a tactical event with strategic consequences for Israel's international standing. On 6th of May, the White House announced a ceasefire with the Houthis, ending months of airstrikes on the Hamas-allied Yemeni group. Israeli and Houthi long-range attacks against one another continued unaffected. By the end of May, in response to international pressure on Israel over its blockade of aid, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation began distributing food. In what would become a near daily scene, dozens of Palestinians were shot, many killed as they tried to reach aid. On the 13th of June, Israel attacked Iran in a wave of airstrikes and commando infiltrations aimed at undermining its nuclear weapons program, catching the Islamic Republic off guard. Iran's ballistic missile response was 90% intercepted, but still caused significant damage in Israel, killing 30 people. Though Israel may have started the war, it is Jerusalem's ally, the US, which finished it.
A short time ago, the US military carried out massive precision strikes on the 3 key nuclear facilities.
But the successes of Israeli air power couldn't be replicated in Gaza's urban brawl. Throughout the remainder of the summer, Israel continued airstrike diplomacy, bombing Damascus in mid-July when internal clashes threatened Syria's Druze community, and killing the Houthi prime minister in late August, in a rare success against the group. But the cost of Gaza continued to mount for Israel, externally and internally. Allies, whose militaries had defended Israel, announced they would recognize the state of Palestine. And fierce debate over Israel's invasion of Gaza City drove a wedge between the government and its military. A failed attempt to assassinate Hamas's leadership in Qatar in September reinforced Israel's increasing isolation, leading to a renewed burst of international efforts to find a ceasefire. The second anniversary of October the 7th is being marked as Israel's war in Gaza may be coming to an end. What happens in the coming days and weeks may decide how the military achievements and failures of the last 12 months are ultimately viewed.
And the security implications, they don't stop just at Israel's border. October 7th, it redrew the entire map of the Middle East, reshaping alliances, rivalries, and even Israel's place in the region. I want to come back to our Middle East correspondent, Ariel, because, Ariel, how do you answer the question, how has October 7th reshaped Israel's place in the region? It's so far beyond just Gaza and Lebanon. We're talking about an entirely different map of the Middle East.
Nicole, what highlights the strategic achievements that Israel has gained over these past 2 years has been described here. I think what first needs to be understood is just this stemmed from the worst failure in Israel's security history. And so from the lowest of the lows, Israel has been able to take this failure and turn it into strategic opportunities, starting from the northern border. Nasrallah is gone. There's a new political reality in Lebanon. Prime Minister Netanyahu even inviting the Lebanese leadership to engage in direct peace talks with Israel. Just not 2 years ago, 1 year ago, that would have been unthinkable. Let's move on to Syria, a completely new government over there, abandoning the Iranian axis to an extent where Iran's top security official cannot even fly over Syrian airspace when he wants to go to Lebanon. Also unthinkable. There's even a regional joke that it's the Syrians who hate the Iranians most in the region, even more than Israel. And if we go to the Houthis in Yemen, yes, I think Israel, this is one of the challenges that remain for the long term, but we are seeing a rough consolidation of an international coalition. It has not yet been formed, but we are already hearing the internationally recognized government of Yemen calling for this international coalition to go after the Houthis. We saw the Americans go after the Houthis. Years back we saw Gulf countries go after the Houthis. Israel is currently the only country that is going after this international global threat, but with this call from the internationally recognized government in Yemen for this coalition, we are hearing new voices that we didn't hear until now. In Iraq, the pro-Iranian militias, they're on their back feet and they're trying to preserve whatever influence they have in Iraq. And I think the ultimate challenge, if we put aside the ongoing challenges with the Palestinian arena, that there's, I think, the most complex of all the 7 fronts is the Palestinian arena with Iran. No more a shadow war between Israel and Iran. This has become the main stage. I fear that the exchange of blows that occurred not just on the 12-day war, but also before that, this is something that we should expect to continue moving forward. But ultimately, this appears to be the end game in this regional conflict. Israel going after the head of the octopus, the proxies effectively dismantled with only one proxy ongoing, that is the Houthis. But as I described, they are being perceived as a global threat, even if not yet treated as such. And so we really see across the board a complete shift in the reality in the Middle East, and this is attributed a lot to Israel's tactical gains that have brought upon a strategic shift, going from the lowest of the lows to currently establishing Israel as a prominent regional power.
Israel is a prominent regional power. It has respect in the Middle East now. Danny, but has it lost that respect in the West at the cost of this respect in the East?
Well, there's certainly a trade-off. Until the 7th of October, there were 3 major powers in the region. None of them is Arab. Turkey, Iran, and Israel. After the 7th, 2 years after the 7th of October, Israel has emerged as the first and the most powerful one. And Iran is very much degraded, and Turkey, I think, is also pretty much at bay. And at the same time, unfortunately, for political reasons, cowardness, and I think very, very wrong other reasons, outrageously many countries, especially our European friends, have recognized a Palestinian state as not on the merit. Palestinians right now do not deserve a state after the 7th of October, but they did it as a punishment to Israel, because Israel fell prey to a brilliant, unfortunately, campaign of starvation and genocide by the Hamas and all their accomplices. But we have to be very, very, very true and very forceful to say, if there was a genocide, it was perpetrated by Hamas. Any war crimes, Hamas has many war crimes. They are the ones who killed Israeli civilians, and also they use their civilians as human shields. Unfortunately, we were not able to persuade most of the world about it, except the United States of America.
2 years later, has the rest of the world forgotten about October 7th? Jonathan, is Israel safer 2 years later, or is Israel just more alert and the rest of the world forgetting those dangers that still lurk beyond?
Yeah, following up on what Ariel said and Ambassador Ayalon, I think militarily speaking, regionally, we're at a much better place, and we're stronger, we're perceived as tougher, more resolute, and I think we cast a longer shadow of deterrence around us, which is very important, and that can be a factor that will help stability, prosperity, maybe peacemaking, maybe making good things with the Syrians or with the Saudis. It's always good to have your enemies and potential enemies and adversaries believe that you are strong, battle ready, and that they shouldn't by any chance think about attacking you. Strategically, however, I think we are in a far worse position than we were before October 7, and we have in some way we've traded regional standing for international standing. And I think that needs to be the focus of the Israeli government. That needs to be front and center of government spending, of priorities, personnel and tasks. It is to fight that diplomatic battle of hearts and minds, lawfare, which is a tremendous front that we are going to, that Israelis, Israeli companies, universities, private citizens, former military, everybody are going to be fighting there.
We will certainly have to wait and see. A lot of questions remain for the future, but you three give us some good perspective on what has happened in the past. Ariel Osran, Danny Ayalon, and Lieutenant Colonel in Reserves Jonathan Conriquez, thank you for being with us on this October 7th special. Now, from everything that's happening in the region, we want to go to Washington now, because the shockwaves of October 7th, they reshaped not only Israel's policy, but its standing in the world, as we just discussed. Now, I went to Kfar Aza with U.S. Ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, as we were there together just 2 months after the October 7th massacre, before he ever dreamed of even becoming the ambassador. Take a look. Kfar Aza, a symbol of both Israel's suffering and resilience. Suffering that U.S. Ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, witnessed himself in December 2023, before he ever imagined becoming America's top diplomat in Israel.
This looks like the very area where we were, isn't it?
This is the exact area. How is it for you being back?
It's gut-wrenching, and it's not a memory that I really want to relive. And it took me, a long time to try to just get where I didn't have these just emotional moments that were going on weeks and months after having been here. And I'll never forget even the stench of death that was in the air. And that was several weeks afterwards, and it was still there.
That was 2 years ago. Today, his visit has added significance. And when you were here, you weren't a diplomat. You were a civilian. You were a strong supporter of Israel. But now you're back here as an ambassador. You carry the weight of U.S. policy. Does that change your perspective being back here now?
I don't know that it changes it. It deepens it. My perspective was pretty solid then. That's why I was here. But it certainly is a vivid reminder of what my responsibility is as an ambassador. I think coming back to this very, very place where I was 2 years ago, it's honestly, it's bringing back some memories I wished I didn't have. It's, I can't get over the fact that some really evil things happened here to people that did not deserve it.
That sense of trauma now shapes how Huckabee approaches his role as ambassador, turning memory into mission when it comes to U.S. policy in Israel.
I think most people would be shocked to find out how seamless the relationship is between the United States and Israel. And that's why I say it's not just an alliance, it's a partnership. What we share in intelligence gathering, what we share in military hardware and the application of it, but also what we share in our common values, being democracies, where we elect our leaders.
How would you say that these two U.S. administrations have worked with Israel post-October 7th?
They became what I considered to be schizophrenic in their policy. One day they were saying, there's not an ounce of daylight between us, we're ironclad in our commitment to Israel. The next day they were threatening to withhold the very arms that were necessary for Israel to eradicate Hamas from Gaza and to stop what had been happening. So that was very frustrating to watch.
You've seen it firsthand 2 years ago, and now looking back over the past 2 years, is there anything that Israel could have done differently?
Israel has tried it hard, and they've tried it soft, and they've tried it everything in between. I give them credit for going to the negotiating table time after time in ways most people have no idea how many deals they've laid on the table and said, here. And Hamas would say, yeah, let's look at that, and then would come and change the terms and then walk away. The reason that there hasn't been an end to this is one thing, Hamas.
You speak about the deals on the table, and Egypt and Qatar are also mediators, as well as Washington. How does Washington view its role compared to these two other mediators?
I think they appreciate the fact that Egypt has been involved and very effectively in so many ways. I think they've legitimately tried to bring an end to it. They put the pressure where it belongs. I'd like to think Qatar has. Times I wish they'd put a little more, because they've continued to house some of these uncivilized savages in their country, and I think they never should have given them nice hotel rooms in Doha, and to sponsor Al Jazeera and to finance the Muslim Brotherhood. But they have been helpful at times, and I guess we should be grateful for what they have done, but I'd be a lot more grateful if they would do everything they could do.
2 years later, more and more Western countries are joining the calls to recognize a Palestinian state. The U.S.'s stance is still, now is not the right time. Do you think there is a right time to move forward with a Palestinian state?
Well, someone would have to define what the boundaries are going to be, who would lead it, what it looks like. Truth is, there was a Palestinian state. It's right over here. It's Gaza. We're hearing the explosions coming from there right now. It was a 100% Palestinian state. They ruled it. They had it. They voted themselves into power. Hamas in 2007 took control. And it was as close to the pure Palestinian state as we're going to see.
How has this relationship between Israel and the United States changed, shifted post-October 7th?
Well, the White House under President Trump has been completely supportive. There were rumors that somehow the Prime Minister and the President weren't getting along. That wasn't true. Or that the United States was pulling back in its support. That wasn't true. And when I was there in July and a part of a number of the meetings between the Prime Minister and the President, it became very obvious that not only was U.S. support for Israel stronger than ever, but the personal bond between these two leaders who made very risky but consequential decisions about Iran and made them together, that bond had never been tighter, closer, and more significant. I do get criticized sometimes because people say, you take Israel's side. Well, it's a very short line of people who even will defend Israel in the midst of this. There's a long line of critics. But here's why I take that position. Israel is our partner. I've said that repeatedly. It's our partner, which means that if you insult my partner, you're insulting me.
Reflecting on everything that's happened now over the past 2 years, when we were here 2 years ago, did you ever imagine that you would be coming back here now as the ambassador?
No. Nicole, when you and I were walking this very trail 2 years ago, I was comfortable living my life in the private sector, hosting television shows and running a bunch of businesses, and thought all my service in government was well in my past. Not many days after the election, the president called. He doesn't ask, he tells. And he told me I'd be coming to Israel as ambassador. And frankly, if he'd asked me to do anything else, I'd have said, no, sir, I don't want a federal job, not interested in getting back into government. But asking me to come here for this position was the one thing I could not say no to, because I've been here 52 years, 100 times. It was a place that I knew well, know well. My wife and I feel at home here, comfortable here. We're dedicated to the idea that Israel has the need to have security. I want every Israeli mother to be able to put their children in bed at night and not worry that a siren is going to cause them to rush them to the shelter at 2 in the morning. So it's the one thing that he would tell me to do that I have to say yes to. And I'm grateful that I have this incredible privilege to represent my country, the United States, my president, President Trump, to be here at such a time as this. Every morning I wake up and I read the president's Twitter account to see if I've been fired. He's notorious for letting people go on Twitter, so I always say, I look, and if I haven't been fired, I know I still have a job today, so get dressed and go do it.
What do you see for the future of Kfar Aza and of Israel, and how do you play a role into that future?
Nicole, you and I came here 2 years ago, and it was a very ugly place. And 2 years later, we come back, and it's still a pretty ugly place. I would love to come back with you in 2 years and walk this neighborhood, and it'd be a beautiful place. And instead of the sounds of shelling in the background from just a few hundred yards from here, I would love for it to be a place where we see little kids playing with their toys, oblivious to what happened here, what would then be 4 years ago.
October 7th will always be remembered as one of Israel's darkest days in history. 2 years later, grief and hope, they live side by side. The threat remains, the war continues, and the lessons of that day are still being written. But from Nahal Oz to Washington, from Gaza to the north, the shockwaves of October 7th, they're still felt in Israel and well beyond. But the story of that day is not over, and neither is Israel's resolve. To everyone tuning in, I'm Nicole Zedek, and thank you so much for tuning in to this special edition of i24 News.